We are excited to have Nicino America as our title sponsor for 2026. Nicino is driven by ingenuity and R&D, bringing innovative chemistry that works. They back every product with a customer-focused expert who knows your field and is ready to help. Stop guessing and find solutions today at www.nicino.net. Thanks again for Nicino for sponsoring the show and this episode of the Specialty Cropcast.
Welcome to the Specialty Cropcast on Pomes and Stones. Join us for real conversations with farmers, agribusiness owners, and industry experts as we dive into farming, products, and the business of agriculture, all from the people who know it best.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We are not live. We are recording in the Nicino studios here.
What episode is this?
I quit counting.
Yeah, you guys are on vacation all the time.
I know.
This guy's getting all mad. Steve and I are fresh off vacation while Zach's been stuck here.
Pale white skin over here.
Does that ever change, even though it's middle of
Yeah, in
summer?
the summertime.
Nice.
Just the arms on the face.
The arms.
Everybody has that.
Oh,
All right, so it's good to be back. It's been a minute since we've done an episode, so it's good to get dust off the podcast skills, and here we are. To my right, backward hat Steve.
here I am.
He's here. Zach's in the corner. And our guest this week is Kelley from Crop Watch. So we are going to get into a little bit of his business here. So thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Nice meeting y'all.
Yeah, so give us a little bit of your background in ag.
Yeah, where are you from? You got an accent, and I like it.
I told you, he didn't even buy you dinner yet, and he's hitting on you again.
you guys from up north. You know, when I went to college, I got there and everybody thought I was from the South. And I'm like, Southern Michigan, I guess. You guys are the ones with the accents, not me. So, yeah. So we're in Sturgis, Michigan, just right on the Indiana-Michigan border. Where I'm sitting right now, I can almost see the Indiana border. So born and raised here. My background in ag, I kind of grew up, we'll say traditional to non-traditional farm. When I was really little, our family had a really large farm. It'd be my great uncles and my grandpa had that together. I remember bits and pieces, but they split up when I was just a kid. Then my dad kind of went off on his own, did a lot of custom spreading, trucking, and making a lot of hay. So I'm well versed in rock picking and square baling. Spent a lot of time doing that, and then did 4-H, so a little bit of livestock, things like that. But yeah, that's until we'll kind of get into the rest, but until the rest, that's up through high school. That was my experience.
Nice.
So when you say you had a big operation, how big is big?
I was pretty little. I think I was maybe 7 when they split up. So I don't know the exact number. But I think they were farming, and I'm saying when they split up, it was 2000, 2001. I think they were around 10,000 acres or so. Did a lot of different specialty crops, had beef cattle, had a dairy. It was a pretty big operation. I remember spending a lot of time as a kid. My dad would take us to the break room before school. And it'd be, probably 20 guys sitting around drinking coffee, and you learned a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
nice.
Probably a lot of stuff that that age kid's not supposed to be hearing, but
20 guys. Yeah, that must have been an operation.
You learn it eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah, that 10,000 acres, so that's a big deal, especially when you're doing that much in different areas. I mean, that's why you got to have a big crew to stay on top of all that stuff. So after high school, what eventually got you more interested in agronomy and crop consulting? Was there some education that you did somewhere and that kind of drove you to that choice?
Yeah, so probably around junior year or so of high school, started getting a little more serious about, what I'm going to do. My parents basically made it known that I was going to college. My dad came up, through the 80s when farming had some bumps, it always has. So he was pretty convinced that college was the way out. So I was working for him, like you said, making hay, square baling, picking rocks. And I did not enjoy that, but so in high school, I actually had joined an athletic training program thinking I was going to do that. I was pretty big into sports. Did that for a little while. Did not like it. So back to ground zero. I enjoyed being outside, but didn't want to do what I was doing. So my dad and uncle had actually hired an agronomist. And my dad's like, hey, maybe you should ask him for a job. So I asked him for a summer job, and away we went.
So there was no time in between. You went from farming all the way through school, and then went right into the agronomy and crop scouting. Huh?
Yeah. I started a summer job for him. Like I said, actually was when I was in high school, and just after the first summer, I was like, I love it. I love being outside. I enjoy it. So I went to Michigan State for a bachelor's in crop and soil sciences, focusing on agronomy, and I worked for him all the way through. Yeah. So as soon as I did it, I knew that agronomy is for me. This is what I want to do.
Okay. So then after you do that, you're working with him for all these summers. How do you end up with your choice to start your own company? Was it something that you saw during your time there that kind of thought that you could fill a certain spot?
Yeah. So while I was working for him, kind of, I guess, on the path through in college, I had actually picked up a dealership, sell seed through AgriGold. So I'd done that.
Nice.
And also started a veggie CSA kind of while working for him. So he was an older guy. He had said, hey, why don't you come work for me? I'm not going to, after school, I'm not going to be doing this forever. Maybe when I'm done, we could work something out that you could take some of the customers and keep going. So that's kind of how we transitioned. So in a way, I got a head start because I was able to take some of his customers in his retirement. He took some, and then I took some, a lot of the ones that I had worked closely with. And that gave me a good footing to get started in the business. He actually worked for me for a short time, and then we've just been, growing ever since.
Yeah. Could you imagine trying to knock down doors and try and get brand new customers like that? It's got to be so difficult.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's intimidating, coming out of college, especially. Like I said, I took on that seed dealership in college, and I would have classes. I'd get done, I think, Thursday at noon. So I would drive home and I would knock on doors Thursday afternoon, Friday, Saturday sometimes. So it was a good introduction to the cold calls. And the first couple of years were spent doing that. We've built up a reputation enough that we can kind of get a little more people coming our way. Not saying that we don't, still go out after it, but first couple of years was a lot of go get it.
Yep. I feel like that's how all good self-employment starts. No one sees you. Everyone sees the nice truck if you're successful and all that, but they don't see all the hours of busting your balls and all the late nights and stuff like that. So obviously what we're talking about and why you're here today talking with us is for Cropwatch. So give us the absolute lowdown on Cropwatch and everything you guys do there.
Yeah. So, we pride ourselves on being an independent agronomy company. So kind of the basis of this business when I started it was crop scouting, which snowballed into everything around it. But crop scouting is our bread and butter. We want to make sure growers are receiving a service that helps them during their, I should say, helps them develop their goals. Every farmer's got a different goal. In general, I would say that the number one goal is ROI. But we help them, whether they want to push the envelope on this or save money here, whatever it may be. So crop scouting is number one. Soil sampling, which gets integrated into every farm plan that we do with a guy. Paying attention to, what's needed, what's not, diving into that. And so then I think it's been 3 years now. This will be our third year. Drone spraying. That's really picking up, becoming a pretty big part of our business. A lot of bumps in the road on that, a lot of lessons learned, but I think we finally are getting a hold of that. That's kind of the bulk of our business. We are partnered with Farmer Business Network, so it was a good opportunity for us to go back to that independent part. We can still work with growers to get their products, but it doesn't have to be a specific name brand. And I'm not knocking on the people that do sell a brand. They do a great job, but, we don't necessarily want to tie ourselves down to a certain company. We like to have the ability to float around and see what works best.
That's definitely unique. You don't hear much about that. You know, everyone obviously there's the big names like Wilbur and Nutrien, and depending on where you're at, I'm sure there's a plethora of other regional places you can get your stuff. So that's an
Yeah.
interesting take on it, to kind of just be independent and, you know, just have an alternate opinion on things that isn't driven by, you know, other motivations or stuff
You
like
know, and
that.
I tell guys, like, I'll be the first one to say it, you know, I'm not for everyone, you know, and what I may have to give you may not be right for you. I really do want what's best for you. You know, I've had a couple customers here and there throughout the years. They hire me, and, you know, we get to working together, and they're just not implementing anything. And at the end of the day, you know, it's just advice. You don't have to implement it. But you know, had one or two guys that just weren't implementing anything, and we kind of got to the end of the year, and they wanted us to come out again. And I said, "Hey, listen, I just don't feel like what we're doing is for you. So, you know, I think it's best that you know." And I gave them some recommendations, and it worked out for them.
How'd you convince your first growers to trust a brand new agronomy business?
You know, I did, like I said before, I got some help with the guy who had kind of introduced me, helped me get started. You know, he did help me a little bit on that. Beyond that, I think it was just luck. You know, there's a lot of nice farmers out there, and they saw that I had a passion for it and a work drive, and just staying honest and consistent. They gave me a chance, and you know, I was determined to prove them that they were taking a good one.
So with the drone applications, was that something that evolved from the original kind of business plan as that technology has made advancements? Is that something you saw like, wow, were people demanding, or not demanding, but were people asking for that service, or was that something that you thought would be a great addition to Cropwatch?
Yeah, no one had said anything about it. You know, I had kind of said probably really, you know, anyone in the area, maybe they were thinking about it, but kind of before I had heard anybody say something about it. You know, I had seen them become, you know, available as an option, something that you could actually use. And I said, you know what? I said, we need to diversify this business. So how are we going to do it? And, you know, that is one option that I see that goes well with everything we do. You know, we can go to a grower, and if they have their own sprayer and it works for them, great. But, you know, we had a lot of growers calling and asking all the time, hey, do you know anybody that spray fungicide? Like, you know, hey, can we this or that? Because we do have a lot of planes in our area, but they get booked up, you know, with all specialty crops especially. You know, not everybody wants to go through it with the ground rig if they have a big enough one. So I looked at that and I was like, hey, this is, you know, for the specialty crop business, there's a fit. Every farm, no, but there are a lot of places where it's going to work well. And obviously we're seeing the drones evolve to be, you know, bigger, more efficient. So where they fit is increasing every
Yeah, they're definitely at all of our farm shows all the time.
Mhm.
We
Yeah.
had a great I think it was the last interview. We had a great discussion about the drones, and an opinion that I kind of have begun to kind of wrap my mind around. I think with the drones is if farmers can, we have all of these lessened regulations on ourselves for, like, we can drive a semi truck in the state as long as you have an F endorsement. I think that's actually gone now. You don't even have to have an F endorsement anymore. So if farmers could get a drone license, but have a lot more minimal requirements without having to go through all the FFA stuff and all of the other jazz that you hear everybody say, I think that makes it a lot more attractive to a farmer. I mean,
For sure.
not to sell you short on your business, but, you know, like, they cost a lot of money, and then the applications cost money. But if they pull that and then they say, hey, if it's on your own property as a farmer, you own the land and you're spraying it, your spray license and all that, that might make that a lot more consistent thing you'd see in farming.
Yeah, no, that'd be a game changer. You know, and you look at this generation coming up, you know, we have multiple interns that work for us, so we go to a lot of career fairs. That's what they're interested in. They're interested in the tech, you know. Not to say that they don't have interest in the old school, everything we do, but like a lot of them are interested in the tech, and the number one thing they're interested in is the drones, because that is the hottest, you know, thing in agronomy as far as tech goes. So yeah, I completely agree. It would be, you know, a big game changer for farmers, especially specialty crops. You know, when you talk about sprayers and the cost of them, not that drones are cheap, but compared to a Haggy, it's pretty cheap.
Yep.
Yeah. When you think about a sprayer tractor combo that we would use, I mean, you're in I mean, if you get brand new top of the line, and I mean, not even top of the line, you're in 150 to 170 probably for a new sprayer,
Yeah.
new tractor.
I mean, I think there's a ton of places for a drone. Like, hey, you got brush in the orchard. Hey, it's warmed up quick. We haven't gotten it out. We need to get a spray out, or,
Very true.
brown rot season's coming. We need to get the tops covered. Like, I think there's really good place for it. So yeah.
What about pumpkins?
Oh, it worked great on our pumpkins. I killed them
Cleaned right out.
afterwards. I killed them afterward when I sprayed them with 100 out.
You hate to see it.
You hate to see it.
Yeah.
Before you guys got into the drone spraying, did you do any custom applications with sprayers and stuff before, or was this your first venture into
Yeah, that was. I mean, obviously, I've been around it. I've done some, on the farm with my uncle and this and that. So, I was pretty familiar with it. But as Cropwatch as a business, no, that was the first time that we've offered any of that.
Where you're located at, what kind of regions and crops do you work, or that are your?
Oh man,
It's been a minute.
I can't do this anymore.
Someone else take the next section of questions. I need a break. What crops and regions are you primarily working in right now? Obviously, based in that lower chunk of the state, you can reach down into the oh my God, I did it again. With where you're located at regionally, you can get down into probably a bigger row crop area, and then you come north a little bit and you run into still row crop in the, in the lower half of Michigan, but also some more specialty crop. What's that look like?
Yeah, so, we're St. Joseph County is, that's the heart where we're at. So, but Southern Michigan, Northern Indiana is what I tell people. I've been crazy enough to drive a ways for a certain job here and there. But within probably about 60 to 70 miles of Sturgis is the bulk of our work. So, if you're not familiar with the area, it's a lot of sandy ground and a lot of pivots. Last I knew, this was a while ago, but last I knew we were the most irrigated county east of the Mississippi River. And I don't know who deemed it that, but somebody called it the seed corn capital of the world. So that's our bread and butter is seed corn production. Last I knew we were producing about 20% of the nation's seed corn. So, we're talking about the corn that goes into a bag, that farmer plants, inbred corn. Cross to make the hybrid to plant. So that's the bulk of what we're doing is seed corn production. It's a really interesting crop because, you're taking, in a sense, you're taking a crop that we were planting in the 20s before hybrid production, and we're still growing it. So it throws a lot of curveballs at us. Obviously we look at, regular row corn, soybeans, wheat, stuff like that. But as far as specialty crops go, we also do quite a bit of cabbage, watermelon, broccoli, do a little bit of cannabis, and there's always a couple other crops that somebody throws in if the specialty guys have it. So it keeps things really interesting.
You find that do any of the growers that you work with do a little bit of both? Are they mostly seed corn, or would they also have that cabbage, that watermelon, or that additional specialty crop to diversify their program?
Yeah, it just depends on, and there's, most of them, if they've got a little cabbage or something like that, they're, I shouldn't say a little, he's got a lot, but they're growing, mostly, field corn or soybeans with it. But, the one guy who did cabbage at one point was growing seed corn too. But when you get into growing multiple specialty crops, as you guys know, it really complicates things and takes a lot of time. So you have to kind of limit yourself. So in general, that's not the case. Down here, a lot of what guys are doing, they're growing seed corn, and then instead they might rotate and rent it to the potato guys, so that way they're not necessarily doing corn, beans. A lot of times it'll be, seed corn, potatoes, seed corn, soybeans, or something like that.
Have you guys got into doing any scouting with the drones? Is there any special kind of equipment out there with cameras or stuff that you can attach to them to scout fields?
We've done a little bit, not a lot. I like to tell people it's a tool. So that's one thing that I think a lot of the younger generation thinks we're going to not have to walk out there anymore. We're going to do it all with that, but it's hard to pick out those little things. What I really like to use it for is assessing major damage, like especially storm damage. You get a big windstorm come in, you knock down a bunch of corn. It's great to get up there, map it out, and see what's actually laying over. Because when you're standing in the middle of that field, it's hard to actually assess what's all going on. So it's a tool in the toolbox, right? We don't rely on it, but it can do a lot of things, and they're getting better and better. Stand counts, things like that. It's really coming along.
The things I've kind of noticed, and when I'm talking with agronomers and stuff like that, or people that salesmen that agronomists. One of the things I've noticed with talking with agronomists and sales is that sometimes when they're trying to let you know about an issue that they have, it kind of comes across as them selling the solution to you kind of exactly in that moment, which I bet is what most of us are a little accustomed to. So how do you try and differentiate that process to not come off too salesy, but also trying to make sure that they have that solution without pushing it?
I mean, in general, I really don't sell it. So it's easy for me to say, hey, this is what you need. Basically, when we find a problem and it needs, whatever product, I go to the grower and there's either two options. Either this is the option or this is the product you need. This is what's going to work. Or I say, hey, let's say it's a nutrient issue. There's a lot of different foliars and dry and everything. So, let's say it's a foliar. I say, go to your retailer and tell them, you want X, Y, and Z, and they'll give you some options, and the grower will bring them back to me, and we'll kind of look at them and say, hey, look, I think this is going to, work best for you. But that's the joy of being independent. I really don't have a stake in that game. So it helps make it so guys trust me. The other thing that we get to see is we cover about 70,000 acres in a year. So I get to see what works with this grower, what works with that grower, and what works with that grower. Every operation's different, but I can kind of try things in small scales across the area and say, hey, this really worked, for a guy over here, so let's try it here.
Yeah, Zach and I, we have the same scout, and sometimes we're running a similar program, via recommendations, and sometimes it's completely different, even though we're
spraying the same crop.
Yeah, it's the same crop, same time, same day, and sometimes it's just different. So it is interesting to see that it could be so similar and so different. So then what you're pretty much doing would be just recommending active ingredients to solve a problem, not name brand stuff that most people get accustomed to hearing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there, like you said, once in a while you have an issue, especially in the specialty world, where there's just one product that's patented and you don't really have a choice. That's it. But once you get, outside of that, which, nowadays, a lot of it does get produced by multiple companies. That's exactly it. I say, hey, this is the active that you need. I don't care where you get it from.
You just need it.
Exactly.
So obviously crop scouting is still one of the more valuable services in agriculture because, like we always talk about multiple times here on this program, is that the more eyes on an issue, or not even a problem, but just the more eyes on your farm in general is always a good thing, because whether you've come accustomed to not seeing something or just someone's better at looking at it than you, it's always a great service to have, and always have other people on your farm, even though it could be maybe if you have a problem, it's not fun to have multiple people come look for a problem if there is one, but you'd rather know you have one than end up with a huge, massive problem that ends up losing your crop. So what are the most common issues that you catch early on that you think growers might miss? I mean, obviously, if I ask you there's a huge list of things that growers could miss, or what you look for. One of the questions here is, what do you look for when you first get to the field? We could probably talk for 8 hours about things to look for. So obviously, if you said seed corn's your biggest crop that you guys are servicing, give us a couple things that you look for right away.
I mean, the hardest thing to, I would say, learn to identify early is disease. Growers, they can find stuff, but disease, tar spot really taught everybody what we knew about disease, because the amount of pictures of bug poop that I've received from my interns or farmers or whatever, and it's nothing against them, it's just, it takes time to learn. Identify those when they're really small. So that, I would say, is the most difficult thing. In addition to that would be nutrient deficiencies. nutrient deficiencies, we still test them just to make sure that we're accurate, but it's just something that, doesn't always come along every day. So it takes a little more learning to be able to pick those out.
Do you do any tissue analysis of plants and send that in to get what the nutrients look like in the plant a couple different times a year? We do that on our farm with our organic cherries and the conventional, and then as well as the apples, we take leaf tissue samples every 2 weeks and
Yeah, sap sample.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Yeah, sap sampling. We take them,
Yep.
they send them, and we get it back, and we get, within a week, we know exactly what we're deficient in, what we're over in, what we could skip out on, and obviously that plays a huge role when you come into different times of the year to make sure that you have the right nutrients at the right time when the tree or the crop demands it. You guys offer a service like that?
Yeah, we do a lot of tissue sap analysis, just like you said, collecting them and sending them in, because we take the soil sample, but that gives us a good base. It doesn't necessarily mean that what's in the soil is in the crop. So,
Right.
we have quite a few customers where we are just taking samples routinely just to make sure, especially in the seed corn, like you said, that's considered a specialty crop. The value is much higher, so the cost for that really is nothing when you factor in missing out on yield.
When you just mentioned high value, it reminded me of a comment that I had on one of the TikToks from the podcast here. And someone said, why, it was when we were talking with Corey about the crop insurance, about the farm bill, about the money that's getting divvied up. And a guy said, why do specialty crop growers need money? Because you guys all have high revenue crop. And I said, whoa. I said, hold the phone. I wouldn't say it's high revenue. They consider it high value. And so I thought that was fun. I didn't get a response to that. So I wonder if he thought twice about that, his question, which was funny. I forgot to mention that to you guys if you weren't checking the comments. But obviously we can talk about technology because that's really at the forefront of everything to be more efficient. It's like when I went out to California for a farm conference, everything is about if we can't get labor prices to go down and you can't get input costs to go down, how do you make the most of that? And that's by being more efficient in the way you use that. So what kind of precision ag tech are you guys using to be more efficient for your growers that you're servicing?
Yeah, so I mean the drones, we've talked about those. They're getting better, but we just talked about tissue analysis. We're looking into testing. There's a lot of different options for taking on-demand tissue analysis. So we're looking at testing those. We had tested the Radical lab from Precision Planting. So I don't want to say immediate results, but soil test results are much quicker, and then when I started with this, the guy I worked for, we did paper reports and now we're using iPads. So every day, we're finding something new to try to enhance that. I can't say iPads is the biggest thing. iPads and a cell phone. What you can do with that is kind of amazing. It's a blessing and a curse because we can get everything now, so everything's expected right now. But that's the biggest tool we use. But we're always looking to be on the cutting edge of trying different things, and some things have worked out, some things haven't. That's okay.
You do any variable rate applications for growers? Or you just make the recommendations via soil samples?
We make them, yeah. So, with our soil sampling program, it goes back to working with the grower as to what they want. Majority of them now obviously are wanting variable rate, which makes it, makes the soil sample worth it. I shouldn't say it's not worth it without, but, we did a study probably on about 500 acres now. It's not cheap, so we walk, don't run. But, we compared soil grids, zones, so we took a zone sample, we took a 5 acre grid, a 2.5 acre grid, and a 1 acre grid. Those seem to be kind of the standard numbers, right? So we took all those, we put them up, put the results up, and we just ran variable rate recs. And we're like, let's take a look at all these and say, where does the cost come out? And most people wouldn't believe it, but even when you include the cost of paying us to soil sample, the 1 acre grid came out the most cost effective every time. Now, some people are going to listen to this and they're going to say they hate grids, whatever, that's fine. my point is by honing in those results and narrowing down those areas, we have taken spots that need it and make sure they got it or got more, and we took spots that didn't need it. You know, you took that 5 acre grid and you took 5 samples instead of one. You really knocked out some of that. So we long story short, I just did the Trump weave, you know, on the story. But long story short, yeah, we've really been implementing the variable rate recommendations for quite a while.
Yeah, and that's a great way to be more efficient with what you're doing. If you can't get your cost of fertilizer down, then guess what? You be a little more accurate with where you're putting it and how you're putting it down. Is there any technology you think that's overhyped, or a piece of technology that people use a lot that's kind of on its way out, you think, or becoming less effective?
I don't want to say it's on its way out, and I'm going to get some negative comments for this, but drones. So, you know, the spray drones, those aside, those are kind of on the up and coming. In some ways, maybe overhyped, yes, but, you know, I think we're still not there. They're still growing. The imagery drones, I think every farmer I knew had bought one. You know, I bought one when we first come out, and I thought, I'm going to use this thing all the time. Like, you know, I'm going to use it for this, I'm going to use it for that. I don't. And those farmers don't either. We just, you know, like I told you earlier, it's a tool in the toolbox, you know, but it's not going to eliminate everything that we're doing. You know, even, you know, let's say, you know, I go out and scout a field. You know, you can send the drone out, even if it can collect those pictures or, you know, really enhance this and that. It still took time. So you just can't get around it. But yeah, I think the drones they came, they're here, and then people kind of fell out of them a little bit. The people that have niche uses for them, you know, that's an exception.
What are some of the biggest agronomic mistakes that you see growers making today?
So, I mean, this is probably, you know, it goes for a lot of the country, but this area especially, because, you know, this is where my expertise is. This area has really adopted cover crops. I would say, you know, potato guys and seed corn guys were some of the first ones that really adopted it. And then you see it on majority of acres now. But learning how to manage those cover crops definitely is a challenge that I don't think any of us expected. You know, terminating it when you should terminate it if it doesn't by itself, dealing with issues with moisture, dealing with issues, you know, it hosts a lot of insects. That's great. But we're also seeing it host a lot of negative insects. So trying to manage all the pros and cons and things that are happening with that is something that this area has done a really good job with now, but it took a while to get there.
Is the cover crops mostly for to cut down on erosion and stuff in the wintertime?
That's a lot of it. I think that's a lot of it. You know, there's some government programs out there, and then, you know, the seed corn companies over here, like I think Bayer, Corteva, you know, don't quote me on it, but I think they're not requiring it, but I think they're, you know, strongly encouraging that you have it for rotating into it. Just, you know, something they like to see, you know. But yeah, I mean, I remember dust storms blowing sand around here in the spring, and it doesn't feel like that happens very much anymore.
Yeah, because that's something we hear all the time now is the regenerative ag thing, and
Yes, there's
putting down cover crops when you're not
farming it.
something in the field, yeah, to cut down on erosion.
Yeah, the most we see up here is people putting like winter wheat down just to
Or rye or something
or
like
rye.
that.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. I mean, we do that with all of our open ground too. We'll put some stuff down, and it's always good to have some sort of cover for the end of the year.
Yeah, rye's the most popular here. Starting to see some more blends. You know, I think that's, you know, as we got into cover crops, we kind of, you know, everybody's throwing rye out. It's cheap, it's easy, you know, whatever, and it has its place. And now we're kind of looking at, okay, well, you know, why are we doing that? What blend should we put in? You know, what's our goals with it? So, you know, we're starting to see quite a few more mixes.
What's one practice growers could change tomorrow that would make a difference in their fields, in your opinion?
Oh, you know, I'm going to revert to, you know, seed corn, beans, but, you know, anything you plant with a planter. And I shouldn't just say planter. I should say this could go spraying too, but like just slowing down, you know. We live in a world, I said it earlier, everything's so fast, you know, we need to do it now. But 100% of your yield is determined by the planter. And when we just slap it in the ground because the storm's coming, I know that not everything can be perfect all the time, but that's where the impacts hurt the most. If we get out there, we see, oh man, something happened with that row and it went across 80 acres. Well, that adds up fast. So just slowing down, planning, spraying, paying attention to weather, paying attention to timing, checking how your equipment's doing. Just stop, get out for 5 minutes. And that's one of my favorite things in the spring is I'll drive by a guy that I'm working for. I see he's out there with the planter. I'll hop out and I'll just go start digging. So that way I can tell him looking good, make some adjustments.
Yeah, because the push you see now is all these planters nowadays. Everybody wants to plan at 10 mile an hour. I mean, you're flying through the field.
Yeah. We got a lot of acres to cover now, but and the planters may be able to do that. If they could do a good job, I'm happy with it. But that's the base thing. It's just making sure it's doing what it's designed to do.
Yeah.
On Farming Sim, I feel like we were planting that fast, and it was fine.
We had consistent good crops and an unlimited budget.
Yeah.
That always
It might
helps.
have been kilometers, not miles per hour.
Oh, that's what it was.
I think one of my next questions here are the practices from row crop farming that you could see specialty crops benefiting or adopting. But I think we've had some conversations and we've kind of come up with our own answer on this, and I'll give you what we've spoke about, and then you tell me what you think. Is that I think it's almost reversed, because when you're row cropping, you have that plant for 1 year, right? When you're growing, fruit or whatever, and you have a full tree that you're growing for decades, you pay a lot more attention on how to keep that tree healthy instead of just, well, I just got to get it through to harvest this year and then it's gone. So I think it's almost like, paying attention to your fertility program is more of them kind of following the specialty crop market.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. It's nothing against row crop guys, but specialty crop guys have it harder. Even the guys that are putting in the single year, specialty crops, like we deal with the cabbage, the watermelon, stuff like that. The amount of options for products, things like that we have, the availability we have is way less. And then you also talk about, like, I go to planting, right? So we're doing a lot of transplants. Well, yes, it costs you, if you had to replant, but a lot of times on corn, but a lot of times at least seed companies paying, saying, hey, you get free replant. Planting the transplants is not necessarily the same thing, but yeah, our portfolio of products just isn't there. We don't have as many herbicides, fungicides, insecticides, all that, but, especially herbicides. But yeah, so I think specialty crop guys are used to that. They're used to just having to pay attention to, like you said, it's high value, but that's because we're putting in a lot of money into it as well, because we can't afford to lose it. The crop insurance, with crop insurance, in the past, there wasn't even a lot of options, still isn't some, or a lot of the options for specialty crops, it's a lot newer. So, yeah.
Yeah, I wish we could go out and spray our fields at 10 miles an hour.
We do.
Yeah, we don't. We
guys do.
We throw
Our trucks are anywhere from 8 to 10, but they're definitely made to do that. There's a reason why, we're carrying 750 gallons around in a bus truck.
Yeah, you can't go out and buy something like that.
It's
made.
It's all homemade. And they take plenty of time to make, in case you're wondering. Okay, so this is actually something that Steve reminded me of, this is something that Steve had a conversation with a coworker about that I think is appropriate. As we look toward the future of crop scouting and recommendations that you might make, AI can do a lot of things. Do you think that there might be a time in the future where you could say that you have an issue? Like you said, you could say, I need a spray program. This is my region. This is the crop. I need something to make me successful to avoid this pest or this, this bacterial disease or a fungus. Do you think that has, what does that look like in your opinion?
Man, that's tough.
That's a good question. I know.
And it spit out like a whole thing.
Oh, yeah. What did I do?
Like
Sweet cherries or something?
I think it was
and
sweet cherries.
Give me a sweet cherry spray recommendation sheet for the whole season in Northern Michigan. And it was like, boom. And I was like,
yeah.
I mean, there's holes in it. There's holes in it, but
yeah. I think it's just like the drones. I think it's going to be a tool in the toolbox.
Yeah.
I mean, it can give you all that, but it can't be out in the field standing with you and say, hey, do it now.
I do
You
think
know?
there's only a matter of time though before drones and AI are together, and this drone's just flying through.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's like AI's telling you what you need to spray for it and what it's seeing.
And then
I'm
it mixes the
sure
loads
it's
and
an
sprays.
Yeah.
And then we're all just sitting on the couch.
Right. Yes.
Just like playing
Basically,
farms.
Just like farm simulator.
Shoot. Yeah, that part is kind of scary for positions like ours. We got to embrace it, I think, because I think it's coming. And
Yeah,
how can we
I agree.
adapt?
I mean, there's also going to be a group of old guys, and I'll probably be in it, that just is going to hold out and not trust it or whatever it may be. So I'll just have to stick with those guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny when you say those old guys, because when that technology's here, it's going to be us in this
We
room
will
that
be
are
those
like,
old guys.
I remember when you used to have to go out and look at your crops to know what was wrong.
So
with them.
true. Yep.
Yeah, don't talk like
Yeah.
that. I just turned 30 something, so just dial it back. All of a sudden, 30 doesn't seem so old once you crest 30.
Yeah, wait till you get to 40.
Yep.
Does anyone else have any questions for Kyle before we wrap it up? I think we're just about there. Is there anything you wanna get off your chest or say to the folks that are listening? Any growers out there that might be listening?
No, I mean, I covered what we do. I covered, I don't have anything else.
If a grower hears this and they're not working with you, how would they best get a hold of you? Obviously, we'll get links, emails in the descriptions of everywhere that people can see this, but how do they get in contact with you to start talking with you?
Yeah, so if they go to our website, www.cropwatch.us, all of our contacts info is on there. So, you can give us a call, send me an email, or there's a contact form on there. If you get with us, we'll get back with you.
Are there any social medias that you'd like to plug for people to, do you guys do any social media out there where they can see you guys working in the field or anything like that?
I started them and then just didn't continue with them. I don't have enough time. So you can find us on Facebook, but it's pretty inactive. Once in a while, I get a bug and I'll post something, but it's it's not very active.
Gotcha. All right, well, we'll get all the links for those in there. You guys have anything else for Kyle before he goes?
Not that I can think of.
We're taking a hard look at the questions right then.
Well, I just wanted to make sure before he goes that we got it all.
I think we did. All right. Well, if no one has anything else for Kyle, thanks so much for taking the time out of your evening here to join us virtually, and we appreciate it.
Thanks,
for
Kyle.
coming in, everybody,
Yep.
and everyone check out Crop Watch online. And if you are looking for some independent service or a separate opinion, than who you're already working with, sounds like Kyle will be more than willing to help you kind of see what your options are.
Plan.
All right. Well, if that's it, thanks everyone for coming in again, and we'll be in touch
Yep.
for another
Awesome.
episode coming up soon. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Kyle.
Thank you.